Welcome to the Nurse Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. Today's guest is Dr. Lorre Laws, and today's episode, how one nurse scientist helps heal the caregiver from burnout and trauma. Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at thenursesharkacademy.biz today. And welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining the confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. We want to welcome to today's show Dr. Lorre Laws of the Haelan Academy, and she is a nurse scientist, author, and trauma-burnout expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the such important work that you're doing. I'm just so blessed to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and I'm excited because this is the first time we had to talk with someone about burnout. But before we get into that, let's start with our very first question: is what made you become a nurse?
Well, my story is pretty non-traditional, but I think many nurses' stories are pretty non-traditional. I started in high school. I was a certified nursing assistant at the age of 15, and that's how I kind of put myself through high school and college. I did 3 years in a skilled nursing facility and then 3 years in a medical surgical ward in a teaching hospital. And at that time, which is very similar to these times, there wasn't enough equipment. And I had a bariatric patient go down, and doing my best to help them, sort of got a very, very serious back injury and herniations to the point where I was on workman's comp for a very long time. And I was planning to go to nursing school, and all of my doctors and counselors, and even at school, they're like, this is not a good career fit for you. You know, your injuries are so significant that we really are going to advise you to do something else. And my 21-year-old self heeded that wisdom. And so I went off and had a whole different career in real estate, mortgage banking, and particularly escrow. I was an escrow manager for a number of years, and I would open escrow companies for loan brokers and real estate brokers, get them successful, and then go open the other one. Well, my young adult self didn't know that was entrepreneurial. I just thought that was doing my job, right? And so, shuffle the deck through a whole bunch of life altering circumstances that we all navigate, including, a really serious, life-threatening condition that I have made a full recovery from. I once again found myself in the position to pivot. So at the tender age of 50, I returned to school and obtained my RN, and I got my master's, and then continued on to earn my PhD in 2018. So I entered the profession at the age of 51. And quickly learned that being in direct patient care had not changed much from the time back in the 19, and I'm going to date myself here if I haven't already, in the late 1970s and early 1980s. At that time, patients were still allowed to smoke in their rooms, and nurses and anyone who was a nursing professional had to wear all whites, which defies all logic. And speaking to the somewhat patriarchal treatment of nurses, historically speaking, which translates even today, we had a nurse's station, as you will find in any hospital now. And at that time, if a physician or a provider came to the nurse's station, even if you were charting, even if you were putting your labs into the computer, whatever you might have been doing, you had to avail your seat. And you had to do so quickly. And you had to do, and if you didn't do it fast enough or kindly enough or any kind of way enough, you would get written up. And so, I carried all of those very early career experiences with me into my 50-year-old entry to practice, and was taken aback, quite frankly. I mean, I had just assumed things would have changed in all that time. In 30 years, surely some things had to have changed, and I was really quite disillusioned, and I knew 50-year-old Lori would not be able to adapt to such a system because I had raised a family, I had run businesses, and taking a very subordinate role where I would be devalued and oppressed. And not valued as an integral part of the care that was happening was really distressing to me. And so that got me, so my start into nursing was, early on, and then, and I have been a nurse scholar. So I'm one of those people that has like a lot of geek flags that I fly around in the air, because I love to read, I love to write, and I love nothing more than diving into that evidence base and synthesizing the evidence, and then packaging it in a way that is user-friendly, bite-sized nuggets that can actually be helpful and implemented by a very busy nurse. So that's sort of my very non-traditional entry into the practice. And I have for the last 10 years, well, no, it's been 12 now. I've been an assistant clinical professor at a major R1 university, where I teach in a BSN program that has an integrative health focus. And that was very much aligned with, where and how I wanted to be as a nurse.
Well, I have to say, first of all, I'm just grateful that you came back to nursing. And I remember when I started nursing school, my professors actually told me, if you're in the clinical space, don't you dare get up and give the doctor your seat. We don't do that anymore.
I am so glad you got different training than I.
Yes. And fun note, we know as nurses, if you were the intern and you were not very nice to our patients, that's one thing we don't like, or you're not nice to the staff, we knew a way to put you in your place. And we may give you a chair, a very special chair. We had a chair on our unit that one of our unit secretaries was frequently incontinent in. That was her chair. So if you were a jerk, you got the special chair. We'd say, "Doctor, this is just for you."
You know what I wouldn't have done to work on your team at that time.
We didn't have too many doctors that we felt that way about, but occasionally we had to do that. And I remember one day I had a doctor, I worked in psychiatry, so I had a doctor that said, "Oh no, I'm not going to come with you. How do I know that this person needs to be in seclusion?" I said, "No problem. I'll just go ahead and call the chief in, and they can come do the 1 hour visit." And they're like, "No, I'll be up there in a minute." And I said, "Are you sure they need to be?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I'll open up the door for you. You can go in and ask them." Yeah, they sign the order really quick.
Yeah, but isn't it, systems and people being what they are, that a nurse would have to take so many steps to ensure that their voice was being heard, their advocacy for their patients was being heard, that we have to go through all of these to even be respected or valued, and we're the ones that are providing all of the care. So it's just so counterintuitive, and it really speaks to some of the systemic issues that we have where nurse historical trauma is concerned, which is something we'll get into later. But it really speaks to, over the generations through generations through generations of nurses, there have been some common denominators of, and it's expressed differently. At the time that I was a very young career woman, we wouldn't dare. Like we wouldn't dare, right? Because it was a much earlier period in time, but still, why are we having to prove ourselves or constantly be swimming against these tides of oppressive practices and contexts? That's the big why for me. But I'm glad you did what you did.
But do you remember the movie 9 to 5?
I do remember that
Okay.
movie.
There's a scene there where Lily Tomlin is trying to take the body out of the hospital, right? And so she's trying to sneak out. She just grabs a lab coat, throws it on. Well, there's a candy striper that comes into her and says, "Do you know where the coffee shop is?" She's like, "No, I don't drink coffee." But this is what always stuck in my mind. The candy striper goes, "Oh, I didn't know you were a doctor." And so Lily Tomlin looks down at her badge and says, "I'm a doctor." Then why the heck am I talking to you? Buzz off. But that was kind of the atmosphere of the doctor was put on the pedestal. Everyone else was, a peon and groveling at the foot of the doctor who knows everything. And I think that there has been some great strides in changing that. And some of the doctors that I work with, when I worked on the floor, it was nice for them to come in and say, "What can I do to help you? What do you need for me to do so you can do what you do?" That has been so helpful.
And that's where I really saw the most shift. And I think this is one of the common denominators that is starting to unite not only physicians, but all health professionals, is that, nurses are not the only ones that are being subjected to inordinate amount of avoidable trauma exposure, secondary to healthcare system inadequacy, short staffing, under-resourced, too high of acuity patients for our training and certifications, all of the things, right? Mm-hmm. But what's unifying all of us is that sadly, we are all being exposed to too much trauma exposure. And so there has been a wave in the recent decades, even in this decade in particular, where there is more compassion, professional compassion across disciplines and across roles. And I think, what is really, what all of this is shedding a bigger light on is that it's not so much the physician-nurse relationship, although that has been problematic historically speaking, acknowledging that, and also understanding, and I think there is becoming a collective understanding around the fact that we have some really big system issues to address. And those transcend far beyond any physician or any nurse's role. And so you'll find units and teams where, under extreme stress, one of two things tends to happen. People come together or they get torn apart. And they kind of, pick at each other and bully and all of the things. And we all know this. And so I think whatever unit a person is in, it's really, those dynamics can largely be attributed to the inadequacies in the systems. We have one, this is a quote from Don Berwick, Dr. Don Berwick, who founded the IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Quality Improvement. And it's like, we have good people, very good people, working in poorly designed systems.
Yes, it's interesting how we've evolved in nursing and in healthcare to get to this point. When you look at how nurses initially had a more autonomous practice.
Right.
A patient could say, "I need a nurse to come work in my home," and the nurse would come, move into their home, and take care of that person, and provide the care, and even write the prescription for what they need, and get it from the pharmacy without having to go through a doctor and all of this stuff. And I think when we created these medical silos in academia, it really pushed us further apart, because one side doesn't know what the other side does and how they're trained, and so there's a devaluing when it's othering. It's a lot of othering. So
Right.
the medical profession lends itself to that. And again, I'm not here to pick on doctors. It's not pick on Doctors Day,
Right.
but they represent such a big part of the problem that we have in this hierarchical system. Most of the doctors are men, most of the
Yeah.
nurses are women. And so we
Yeah.
can't forget that that was part of the dynamic, and having those conversations in healthcare right now is so important. So, how is it that you help your students then navigate going into the profession now?
Well, that has been, and even my own daughter. My own daughter is in her second year of practice, so she's a home hospice nurse, and so it's really personal, that question to me. And I treat every student as though they're a member of my family. Like I am that teacher that is like, just so I'm just so there for them in all the ways, and as many nurse educators are. And it feels like, I'll be honest with you, we work so hard, and in academia it's no different than being in a healthcare setting. We're short staffed, we're under resourced, we have too many students that we can, every year they're asking us to take more students, and there's physical limitations to how many patients a person can care for, or how many students a nurse
Yes.
can educate, right? And those limits, there's this kind of perception out there that, well, resilience is like an unlimited fountain of youth. Like, you just need to be more resilient. You just need to be more resilient. But the human body does have, it has boundaries and guidelines, and it can only do so much, no matter who we are. So with all of that in mind, you feel like you're doing such a good job. You do the best you can, just like in patient care. You're doing the best you can with the resources that you have, the time that you have with each and every student. And then come graduation day, it is a little bit, if I'm to be honest, like pushing them off a cliff. Because the transition, or sending lambs to slaughter. I've heard some, and these are the students. These are the students' words that they bring back to me, because I stay in touch with them on LinkedIn and other places. Right after they've graduated, they're now my colleagues, and so how fun is that for me to still be able
Yes.
to be connected with them in that way? And so, that really got me curious about, not only I saw it going on 50 years ago and 30 years ago, and now I'm still seeing it again. And so that really started getting me to ask some pretty big research questions, like, what's really going on here? Why, I'm seeing these patterns across decades. I'm seeing these patterns in the beds, in the clinical settings, in direct patient care. I'm seeing them in academia. I'm a nurse scientist, another geek flag going up right now. And there's no lack of that even in grant funding and, getting published in peer-reviewed journals. So it's kind of like, no matter where a nurse positions themselves in practice, we're all facing similar challenges. They're being expressed differently, but when you start getting down into the root causes, you find that there's so much more going on than just burnout.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And that to me is a word that's been overused, and to the point that it's now not even effective, right?
Right. Nurses feel gaslit by it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, wait. The system is creating all of these problems. And it's sort of like this blaming the victim. In fact, I just wrote a short article on burnout syndrome and contrasting, because I had done a symptom cluster analysis. Okay, here comes another geek flag, but I'm just going to touch on it because I really got curious about, like, if it's burnout. I'm one of these people, I have like 10 million questions and like 1.5 answers, right? So if it's really burnout, then why aren't nurses responding to traditional self-caring practices that we all know how to do?
Right.
Don't tell a nurse to go take better care of themselves. We're the ones that have the license to say we do this. So don't talk to me about self-care. We all know how to take care of ourselves and others That's the gig. And so when I started really looking into this, and at this time my own daughter's in nursing school, and it's in my living room. I mean, there's just like no escape. But this is like, it cannot be ignored by me at this point in my life. And so what I found is, when you start really, really deep diving, is that the symptoms of burnout across physical, mental, emotional, relational, existential domains overlap substantially with traumatization. And so nurses are not responding to and feel gaslit by the terms burnout and resilience, which you will not find. You will not find self-care or resilience anywhere in my work, not in my book, not anywhere that I am, because that is a blaming the victim cultural problem. And so, kind of where my research, I did 5 years of research across 4 disciplines. And it led me to understand deeply that what we're talking about is nurse-specific traumatization. And for those of you, okay, I got to throw up one more geek flag, and then I think I'll be done. But maybe not. But maybe so. Maybe so. But
We're
at the same time, I know, I'm having so much fun. But at the same time I was doing this research, it really, and again, I teach theory courses. So I'm one of those people who actually liked nursing theory. That's part of the whole PhD track, is you kind of spend a lot of time in those places, and it just is an area that I enjoy. And so I was like, well, I have all this research, and I knew that in order to help nurses, I had to put it in a book that could get to their living rooms. I had to start a business where I could help people, nurses, facilitate their healing. Because you can get information from a book, but healing has to be facilitated for us too. Yes. We need to be cared for. We need to be seen, heard, and understood and valued. And so at the time I was doing all this research, I was like, holy moly, I don't see a nursing theory. When you go to write a book as an academic, there's certain rules you have to follow. Now, this is not a textbook, mind you. It's written as though you and I are hanging out just as we are now, right? Here, right. I see the problem. Here's what the evidence says. How can I help? And I bring a framework and over 100 practices to really guide nurses through this process. But I still, at the same time, have to, be mindful of the science and the underpinnings. And sure enough, Dr. Karen Foley brought out this middle range theory of nurse psychological trauma. And that will be a game changer. I'll go on record and say, having a middle range theory that we can use as scientists, as educators, as clinicians, as leaders, that we can draw upon this, and the studies that will examine this and really help to change the paradigm of how nurses are treated and valued. Because above all, we have to be safe and we have to be professionally well, because we know that translates to all good things for patients, and it also helps the organization's bottom line. So why we're not doing that already, since 1975, I've been around, to 2024, why aren't we doing this? I don't know, but I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do my part to get this information and these resources out so that we can start the process, because it's just not sustainable what we're doing now.
It really isn't. And I think with the pandemic and everything, it kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, as you can say, and we saw the wound that was there, and it's been left to fester. So you mentioned moving on into having your own business and writing your book. How did that idea come to you to start your business?
Well, I'm an academic, so, starting a business is about as far away from my day job as I could have possibly gone. And it really, I think, like most entrepreneurs, I think all of us nurses, we're problem solvers. We assess. We look for the evidence. We diagnose what the situation is, and we look for the evidence and how can we help and how can we improve outcomes, right? The nursing process, clinical judgment model, there, whichever framework you're using, but the process is very similar. And as I'm looking around, I knew I have published in peer-reviewed journals on these topics, and I knew that they were not getting into the living rooms of the nurses who need it the most. Because who can afford to spend $48 on one article?
Right.
If you're not in academia, you have to pay for that, unless your organization happens to subscribe to that journal, right? And they're not paying money to subscribe to nurse professional well-being
Well,
publishers.
a lot of the hospitals used to have libraries and they don't anymore. So you don't
Right,
even have that luxury. And I miss that. I
right. So
miss having a hospital library.
yeah, I just, it would be like working with one hand tied behind my back if I didn't have that. And so, I think this is where it's real fortunate and probably divinely guided that I re-entered at the age of 50, because I had a whole toolkit of skills that I didn't have at 21. And so I started getting really practical about this. And again, my own daughter's in nursing school. And so like my motivation was like next level now, like motivated on steroids. And it's like, well, the best way that I can get this book, this evidence, this framework, this help to the nurses is I have to meet them in their living room as though we're having a cup of tea. Now, my clinical specialty is integrative nurse coaching. So that, it sort of evolved from that. That's where I got my clinical research of like working with nurses before, during, and after the pandemic who were refractory to traditional burnout, self-caring, resilience building, all the words that none of us want to hear anymore. And they were refractory to that and still suffering. And so, from my own family, from my own clients, from all of those lenses, I was like, well, what the world doesn't need is another peer-reviewed journal that is going to sit in a white pearly tower somewhere. Right. Because I'm not in this at this point. At this point in my career, I'm closer to retirement than not. So I'm all about making a difference. I'm here to self-actualize on Maslow's, where we're taking care of my profession is, my colleagues and, my tribe. It's really, I just feel it so deeply in my heart. And so I knew I had to write a book that was priced at an accessible point that would be internationally distributed. And I was like, well, that's great. I don't know the first thing about writing a book for a general audience. I'm a scientific writer. That's how I've been trained. And ain't nobody want to read that, right? We've all been to nursing school. We are done with that. So it's like, I went to author school for a year to learn how to write for a general audience, a general professional audience. And then I no sooner finished the book and I sent out a proposal. And this is serendipity, and I'm a really spiritual person. This is my calling, and I know that sounds trite, but boy, do I feel it in my body in ways that I have felt very few other things, And so I got the book. I submitted only to 3 publishers as a first-time author with no agent. I'm just a nurse on a mission. That's all. And I got a publishing contract, a traditional publishing contract on the first 3. So I was like, whoo, I was expecting to fight for that for years. And so it went through that whole process to get the book to the publisher, and they take 12 months with it before it comes to market. So, in the interim, I got this other little calling that I call it. It was like, we need, like, the book is good. Yeah, good job, Lori. Here, pat yourself on the back. Nicely done. Bravo. We need a place for nurses to be actually facilitated in their healing. That's what's needed next. I was like, oh, come on now. Really? I have to start a business? I'm not sure how I feel about this. And so as part of that due diligence, I started looking at all of the places that were, because nurse-specific traumatization is not a term that you encounter yet a lot in
No.
the mainstream narrative, and that's part of my job, is to bring that awareness. But I was looking, so I went to the American Nurses Association websites and all these private companies that provide, continuing education and resources for nurses burnout. And every single one of them, without exception, to my utter dismay, did nothing but post a bunch of resources and push them out to nurses in a sort of go heal yourself fashion.
Yes.
Now, I'm a healing arts practitioner of over 40 years. So my little healer's heart was like crying over this. Like, yes, resources are helpful and they have their place. When we have a cancer patient, we educate them on their cancer. Of course, that's an important part of it, but we don't just hand them a bucket of stuff and tell them to go fix themselves.
Call your EAP rep.
Yeah. So out of necessity, because when this book comes out, it'll come out in Europe in December, and here in the United States in the 1st of January. Available for pre-order now. Shameless plug, and thank you. But yeah,
what's the name of the book? You've never said that.
Oh, you know what? I'm such a teacher, and just so, I'm still trying to grow as a business person. It's called Nursing Our Healer's Heart, and it's a recovery guide for nurse trauma and burnout. And it's available everywhere, including my website. Well, we can talk about all that later. But what became clear was that I could not, as the nurse, the scientist, the author, all of the things, the mom, the nurse coach, like I couldn't just be another one of those websites that's just pushing out DIY stuff for nurses. Like, nurses need a place where they're safe, they're seen, they're heard, they're felt, they're facilitated in their healing, because we are supposed to heal in community. Yes, there's an individual aspect, of course, for each of us. Yes. But, we're so traumatized that we feel like we have to, crawl into a cave and heal and suffer alone. And our nervous systems are not designed for that. They're designed for co-healing and co-regulation. And so that's how my entrepreneurial journey started, which is like most nurses, right? And most entrepreneurs, there's a need and nobody's doing it. And somebody's got to do it.
That's
and
right.
By default, that became me. But I didn't ever aspire, knowingly. I mean, now it makes perfect sense. I'm this far along in the journey, and now I see it. But, 2018 Lori did not see it.
And that can be said of a lot of entrepreneurs, that you see a problem in the marketplace, and that you have the solution for it, and you bring it forward. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I have a business. There's a business in this.
Well, to the point in my case, because this is international work, I researched all the English-speaking countries, because sadly, I didn't get a second language, and I still, despite numerous attempts, can't conjugate verbs worth a diddly. And so I had to focus on just English-speaking countries. And so here I am with this, kind of like with the book. It's like, well, I can't self-publish this. I need to get a traditional publisher that has the distribution network, because that's for any entrepreneur who has sort of a physical good. And of course, there's ebooks and everything else that follow. But initially, in the publishing game, you get the print book, and then they'll do the other things if you sell well. Is how that game is played. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn how to do all of that. I shouldn't say had to, because it wasn't a burden. I got to. But it felt like a burden doing it as a side gig to my full-time professor job. I won't lie. This has been, it's been a lot of 14-hour days. And so, but it's also a privilege. So, and the same thing happened with starting the business. Now, mind you, I had all that real estate and escrow experience, but that was all before the internet.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like we were just, when I left that role, we were just starting to learn how to use email, and it was the coolest thing ever, right? We still had faxes and pagers, and there wasn't cell phones then. And so what I quickly learned is that while I had good working knowledge about how to run a business, and I had experience in that, um, the conceptual knowledge transferred, but the application in the digital world to do an international healing container for nurses, because this can't happen at the workplace.
No.
We can't offer these programs in the workplace. It's like asking a firefighter to go meditate in a burning structure, right? It's not going to work. The nervous system cannot. It doesn't feel safe, and healing can't happen when we don't feel safe. And
Right.
so then that led me to, well, I guess I went to author school, and that didn't kill me. So let me go to entrepreneur school and figure out how to fill this chasm gap that I had from my 1990s to 2000 ish business role, and how can I translate that and update that so that I can be successful. And really being successful to me means serving as many nurses as possible, because I grounded my corporation as a nonprofit corporation. And so it was really important to me that nurses knew that this was a heart-driven, service-driven, because I care with every fiber of my being driven project. And so nothing says I care more in a business structure
Yes.
than nonprofit. And then that allows people and healthcare organizations to get involved in a way that is attractive to their bottom line, because they're making donations. And so the nonprofit thing just seemed to be the best structure. But the application, the entrepreneurial application for an international business is the same as any for-profit. It just
Yes.
happened to be that was the best business structure for what I'm doing. But oh boy, have I had to learn a lot, and am still learning a lot about all that's required.
So, how are you navigating taking your business internationally? Because I know there's a lot of nurses out there that are listening that maybe they have a business and they want to serve a larger market. How do you tap into that market and also not run afoul of any local laws or anything like that? Because I've talked to nurses from other healthcare systems and how they do it differently. And from what I've seen, the complaints are all the same. I don't care where you are in the world. Nurses have the same complaints. They're striking for the same conditions and wages and things like that. It's the same thing across the board. But how do you navigate some of that, the differences that are there?
Well, for me, and I'm probably a little bit niched in this regard, because I applied for the IRS here in the United States, is how you apply for your nonprofit status, and so I applied for educational, because I felt first and foremost it was educational, and then I'm nurse coaching effectively. I mean, I have an evidence-based framework and 100 plus practices, and each nurse develops their own unique strategy, because we all have a different trauma background and professional experiences and all of that, right? And so I was really mindful about how I was going about this, because I did not want to bump into those challenges that I might have in other ways. So because I'm educational, and that's how I'm classified, it gives me, I think, a little more latitude than if I had a different type of a product or service that, now I do need to be mindful of, sales and taxes and, all of those, normal structures as, in conversions and money conversions, and who needs what tax in what country. And so, and I am not going to learn how to do that, just so we're clear. That's somebody that I'm hiring somebody for.
Well,
uh,
because I think a lot of nurses, when they talk about being a nurse coach, we because if you come from it come from a nursing standpoint. Like if you're a nurse-owned business and you're expanding to, let's say, another state to provide services in that state, you have to be licensed in that state. And so
Right,
but
right.
if you're doing education, you can teach and do education to anybody in the world. And I think that's part of the difference. And I think that's important for the listeners to understand that.
Yeah, and we're new, we're in our infancy. So I am sure that there is more that I will be learning in the years ahead, and maybe we'll get together in a couple of years' time, and we can talk about all that was learned in this nurse entrepreneur journey. And yeah, because and I had to seek legal counsel on that one, because I'm like, I'm not looking to lose my license here. And it's like, no, this is, your book is educational. You're not prescribing supplements, or anything that might be construed as practice, right?
Right.
And so I think for all nurse entrepreneurs, that's something that we all just need to really safeguard our licenses, and making sure that we're practicing within our scope, and and how that translates into other states or even other countries is it gets, as you said, it gets complicated very, very quickly.
Yes, because when we work with the Nurse Shark Academy, I can work with nurses all over the world, right? Any nurse that wants to start a business, because what I'm providing you is education. I'm not treating you as a patient, and I get
Right,
selling you supplements. I may sell you a course. I may sell you a book. I may sell you a mastermind group or be a part of our
right,
organization. But um, we're not selling you something that you need a special license for,
right.
unless we change that model. And I don't see that coming. There's other avenues that you can do. So when you're starting your business, you need to know, are you like more client facing, patient facing? Then you'll need to make sure you're licensed and credentialed wherever you operate. But if you're not, then and you're just doing education, then you don't have to worry about that. And again, that is very wise, and I encourage everyone, seek legal counsel.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
make
it's
sure.
so important.
Mhm. Okay, well, we're about close to the end of our time. So I have here on your sheet that you are offering our listeners a there's two scholarships available for your nurse trauma recovery program. How do they get a hold of you, and how do they apply for this?
Well, thank you so much. And it's my good privilege. And I also want to just give gratitude to our benefactors. These did come in through donations through the nonprofit, from prior clients who wanted to pay it forward to other nurses. So thank you. Thank you. They chose to be anonymous, but they know who they are, and they know how grateful I am. And so what we have is a 3-month virtual, and with live sessions and recorded sessions. So it's a 3-month program, and it's offered through the Haelan Academy, which is my nonprofit, and everything is on my website at drlorrelaws.com, which I know you'll put in the show notes. And
Hmm.
you can just use the contact form right there, contact us, like any website anywhere, and just you say Nurse Shark Academy Scholarship. And then we will, if we have multiple people who apply, we will do a raffle, and of course we'll announce that, and you'll be working directly with me in that process. So we're so grateful to be able to bring that into your community, and hopefully it will be of service to someone out there.
Well, I want to say thank you, because that's very generous of you to offer that to our listeners. And those of you who are listening, and maybe you have more questions about um, Dr. Lorre Laws and what she does in her, I'm going to get this right, Haelan
You
Academy.
got it.
You can reach out to her at her website, drlorrelaws.com, or you can follow her on her LinkedIn page as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, my handle's at Dr. Lorre Laws. Everything's at Dr. Lorre Laws. So
There you
I'm
go.
easy to find, but the spelling of my name is quite unusual. So be sure to grab it from the show notes. And true story in closing on that my name is spelled a little unusually. My mom back in the day, husbands and families weren't allowed in the delivery room, and so she knew she wanted to name it if it was a girl, Lori, and she used her time in labor to figure out how many different ways she could spell Lori. And this is the one she settled on for me.
Well, fun fact, my sister, growing up, her name is Michelle. She spelled her name Michelle her whole life. But when she started to go to college, she found out that my dad, who filled out her birth certificate, misspelled her name and spelled it Michele. So there's no two L's. So it's still Michelle. But she ran into a lot of trouble trying to go to school because her name on her birth certificate was misspelled.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the things that happen, right, when new babies are born.
Exactly.
There's always a good story there somewhere.
So I'm going to ask our last question. If you had a piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, what would it be?
I think first and foremost, and I'm going to this was advice given to me by Dr. Marilyn McHugh, who was on my dissertation committee, and it has been the most transferable piece of advice I've ever had. So when I was doing my dissertation or starting my business, and to the nurses out there who are looking to start their own, find the need or find the gap, and then drive your Mack truck through it. Trust yourself, trust your intuitions. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know what you need to know today. Because it can,
Right.
it can be a little bit overwhelming if you think like, oh, I'm a nurse today, and tomorrow I'm supposed to know everything about being an entrepreneur. Somehow our minds will leap ahead in those ways. And so it's like, it's one bite at a time, one step at a time, eye on the horizon, steady as you go, work from your heart, know your value, and then add tax, because you're worth it and you can do it.
There you go. Yes. I say nurses can do anything. And if you can write that nursing cure plan, you can write a business plan. Just take it
Absolutely.
one day at a time.
So
Well,
true.
thank you for coming. This ends our show today. Those of you that are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're notified every time we upload an episode. And those of you that are listening through Podbean or wherever you get your podcast or our audio version, we want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to become a patron of our show so we have special content for those that are patrons. And we'll be having some more surprises for our patrons coming up. Again, thank you for being on the show, Dr. Lori, and
Thank you.
you are wonderful.
As are you. Thank you so much.
Nurses, are you ready for more? My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and the freedom to live your life on your own terms. Assisting you in achieving your goals through tailored advice, continuous learning, and a collaborative approach is at the heart of everything I do. Stop being eaten alive. Come feel the sun. Be a nurse shark. Hello. Thank you. And I wanted to announce that the Nurse Shark Academy show has been nominated for the 2025 Women in Podcasters Award in the category of careers. I look forward to the voting season. It starts in May. Stay tuned to hear more information about how to register and vote for our show, the Nurse Shark Academy show.
Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the NurseSharkAcademy.biz.